At the Palazzo Grassi exhibition in Venice, Julie Mehretu is not alone. She came together with a group of friends and artists that she's known for a long while. Nairi Bergramian, Uma Baba, Tasita Dean, David Hammonds, Robin Coast Lewis, Paul Pfeiffer, and Jessica Rankin. Their works can also be found here, alongside 25 years of Mehretu's art. Ensemble is Mehretu's greatest exhibition in Europe ever. And it's not just about the artist herself, but also her affections, her spiritual and aesthetic affinities with a community of like-minded artists. I'm Caitlin Prest, and this is Ensemble, a podcast for Palazzo Grassi, Pinot Collection, Venice. Ensemble includes 17 large paintings by Julie Mehretu from 2001 to 2024, all acquired from the Pinot Collection, alongside those coming from private collectors, international museums, and Mehretu's own personal collection. Besides Mehretu's art, there are also more than 30 works from other artists in the exhibition, all of whom are old friends and part of Mehretu's close circle. The works have come to Venice from several museums and collections. Two of Mehretu's large works already made their way to Venice back in 2011 for the In Praise of Doubt exhibition at Punta della Dogana. But Mehretu's connection with Italy goes even further back, all the way to a distant past.
When my father began, when I was in college, he began doing the Rome program, an urban studies program, urban history and geography class that he would teach in Rome every summer through Michigan State. From college onward, I basically almost every summer would go and visit my family in Rome. And so Rome was a place that I experienced for 30-something years, almost every summer, almost, not every single one. And my children grew up going and visiting their grandparents in Rome. It became this place that we all have a very special connection with. My parents adore and love Rome, and it's a place where I studied a lot of art. I think it's been very influential and formative for me as a young artist.
Spending time in Rome was a unique experience for Mehretu, as she was able to tie her own family history together with a larger group experience.
We went to see the Ethiopian obelisk that used to be in Rome in front of the FAO building, right? We would go, most of the times that we were there, before it was returned, we would go. And then it was returned. It was returned to Aksum, which is where it was taken from. And after it was returned, my family, when we went maybe 14 years ago, we went on an expedition to find my great-grandfather's grave, which was in Aksum, and to visit his church that he had started there. And we went to see these obelisks in Aksum, and it was incredible to see the same obelisk that was in Rome in Aksum after that, on that trip. So that's kind of a cool, reversal of and moment of experiencing restitution, and to have seen it then in its home in Aksum again was amazing.
Let's return now to Venice and Palazzo Grassi. Caroline Bourgeois is the curator of the Pinot Collection and of the exhibition Ensemble. Bourgeois also worked on the In Praise of Doubt exhibition in 2011 at Punta della Dogana, where two large paintings of Mehretu were shown. It's fair to say that she's followed Mehretu's work for quite a while.
I started personally to follow her work before I was working for François Pinault even, so it's a long time. And she was doing those kind of abstract architecture. We didn't include, it was before 2008, for example. And at the time, the color were more brown, less gray. And that's when I started to understand how much she changed her practice.
Bourgeois believes that the theme of displacement is essential in Mehretu's poetics.
She's a displaced person, which I think is important because the first main project of her abstract painting was about architecture and the power of the city within the architecture. She invented a way of painting with a lot of different layers, and she moved now to something which is coming from important moments in our lives. So the more recent works, for example, are starting from the Ukraine war and the Capitol with Trump. And she erased the fact, so there is ghosts in her painting. And you have a lot of layers with all those ghosts, and the body is always there. And there's something which is very musical with the painting at the end. So you dance with the painting nearly in a way. Also, something very specific with her work is that you will see that she changed a lot during the show, but you always recognize her Julie Mehretu, whatever.
Ensemble, as an exhibition, is structured according to a free narrative, not a chronological one. We asked what criteria she used when selecting the works.
I'm working with the Pinot collection here. The building is not made for retrospective because you have very different and site-specific size of the rooms. And also, I wanted to be able to show the more recent work of Julie. And I also proposed her to share the idea of communities, the political sense of the work of Julie Mehretu, which was that she involved her closest people who helped her to exist. So we included the guests. So it's a very specific exhibition, which doesn't put everyone in terms of individuality, but more in terms of communities.
In the past, Mehretu also had exhibitions in places such as the White Cube Gallery in London and the Guggenheim Museum in New York. As for Ensemble and Palazzo Grassi, the succession of spaces distributed on 2 floors suggested to her the idea of constant rhythm and beat.
I think there's so many things that come into making an exhibition of this scale. We started planning it, I think, almost 4 years ago. Caroline is a very interesting curator in how she wants to approach the idea of the rhythm of the space, because this building has all these various rooms, and because of those rooms and the various scales and how you move through the rooms, there is a certain kind of rhythm or a certain kind of ebb and flow that you want to be able to really carry somebody through this amount of space without it feeling redundant or without it feeling didactic.
Let's move in to get a closer look at one of the works. The painting is called Miho's Torch, and it was produced between 2018 and 2019. It's inspired by a tragic news story. A fire in the National Museum of Rio de Janeiro, which took place on the evening of September 2nd, 2018. In just a few hours, all of the collections were almost entirely destroyed. More than 20 million objects went up in smoke. A devastating event for the history and arts culture of the Brazilian people. The painting, inspired by the terrible event, was based off of a photograph.
And those are the kind of images I tend to use when I'm working on the underpaintings or the points of departure for the painting. Then I start to play with that image in the computer, blur it, break it up, do something to it. And then I start to work on it after we apply the surface. When I started to work on that painting, it was much later. And eventually this kind of, figure, it seems to emerge from it. There's something that's really moving in that for me that I can't really talk about, I can't articulate, because my interest in it is how all of that information coalesces to make to the experience, the visceral and felt experience in front of the work.
Conversion, SM del Popolo, After C, is the title of another painting in the exhibition, quite a troubled one, produced between 2019 and 2020. Mehretu began working on Conversion, SM del Popolo, After C, in Berlin. but only completed it a year later in the US. Once finished, Mehretu was reminded of a painting she had seen in Rome.
And then when it finished, there was this kind of massive kind of blinding light form that I feel like you see that emerges in the painting. And it made me think of the painting at the church in Rome, Piazza del Popolo. And there's this amazing Caravaggio at the Conversion of St. Paul. And he gets struck by the light, remember? And he becomes blind by the light and he falls off his horse. And it's this amazing painting of Caravaggio where the horse's ass is what you really see. And Paul's like having a static moment with the light and the horse.
David Hammons is the oldest of the artists in Ensemble. Born in 1943 in Springfield, Illinois. During his long career, Hammons has used different methods of expression, such as conceptual art and sculpture, drawing, and public performances. One of his most famous and original actions was the Blizzard Ball Sale, documented by a series of photographs. The performance took place in 1983 in New York on a cold, snowy day. Hammons laid out a colorful carpet on the sidewalk in Lower Manhattan, and he started hawking wares that perhaps no one had ever thought to sell. Snowballs. In the pictures, we can see Hammons bundled up in a long, dark coat. In front of him, we can see the snowballs all lined up in a row, perfectly round and in different sizes. In a second picture, Hammons is giving one to a kid. In Ensemble, we can see another of Hammons' works with a strong symbolic meaning, produced in 2 limited series and then acquired by several museums. It's called "Oh Say Can You See?" like the first line in the American national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. In this case, the work of art is an object. In the words of Caroline Bourgeois,
the flag specifically became quite famous because it changed the American flag with the Pan-African colors. So the black took over faith and that they can get back their own history, which means going through what happened with the slavery. So then it became it's in front of the Harlem Museum. It became a huge an edition unlimited too. It's rare to see in flesh, but it's a symbol of fighting, can bring you to your rights.
Artist Paul Pfeiffer, who we also listened to in the first part of this podcast, has been collaborating with Julie Mehretu for a long time. In Venice, we can see a series of sculptures of his called Incarnator, which recreate parts of the body of the famous pop star, Justin Bieber. The sculptures recreate a torso and a pair of arms and legs covered in tattoos. These have been created using an ancient technique from the Philippines, Spain, and Mexico.
So for about the past 7 years, I've been exploring a project which is formed through an association with particular craftspeople in 3 different parts of the world. One in the Philippines, second in Spain, and third in Mexico. And these 3 different locations on 3 different continents represent 3 kind of pivotal points in a historical trajectory which goes back to the 16th century, something called the Acapulco trade, which was a trade route in which Spanish galleons were exploring globally.
Pfeiffer's talking about the Incarnadura, an ancient tradition for the crafting of images, sculptures, and religious objects.
There's a particular story that Magellan, who represents, the first circumnavigation of the globe in 1521, came to the Philippines, and he brought with him the first of these religious images, which was an image of the baby Jesus, the Santo Niño. He brought it to the Philippines. It arrived in the Philippines in 1521. He would have been coming to the Philippines through Acapulco and arriving, and he left this image of the baby Jesus. And to this day, it's the most venerated of the religious images in the Philippines.
But what is the link between the ancient Encarnadura tradition and a modern pop star like Justin Bieber? Here's Paul Pfeiffer again.
Why Justin Bieber? Because I see him as like a figure like the Santo Niño. But now bringing it into the age of the internet, he's one of the first YouTube stars. He has a global following. He's famous for starting out as a child, even though he's an adult now. But in a sense, he lives as this image of a kind of child who is at the same time a king with global power, representing both innocence and corruption, in a way androgynous, both male and female energies. Sometimes he's represented as white, sometimes he's represented as black. This is the tradition of the Santo Niño. It's a very enigmatic tradition. And I guess what I'm trying to do through this project is to describe the simultaneity of a reality from 500 years ago and the reality of the present and the reality of a kind of potential future.
As we climb the stairs between the first and second floor of Palazzo Grassi, we can hear music. It's a composition by Jason Moran, international composer and jazz pianist, born in Houston, Texas in 1975. Mehretu and Moran are friends and share mutual admiration. Back in 2012, Moran traveled to Kassel in Germany, where every 5 years the Documenta modern art exhibition is held. As he entered the room, he saw a series of 4 paintings by Mehretu called Mogama, inspired by the ministerial building in Tahrir Square, Cairo, where the Arab Spring protests took place. Moran was so impressed that he sent Mehretu a message to tell her that it seemed to him almost like a great musical composition.
The first time I saw a series of Julie's paintings was in Kassel, Germany, at Documenta in 2012. And it was a series of 4 very large paintings called Mogama. And these paintings seemed to not necessarily jump out of the canvas or mark the wall as much as they did mark the air. And that's what I feel music is capable of doing. It's capable of changing the temperature of the air. And I just thought it was something about how the phrases, and I call them phrases, as in music phrases, the phrases crawl across the canvas, much like in a score when a musician reads a score from the top left corner to the bottom right. The phrases crawl up and down the ledger lines of the staff, of the manuscript paper. But there was no manuscript paper, so the notes and the phrases were free. I was blown away by it, and I wrote her immediately.
For the Mogama, Mehretu was also inspired by other places where political and social change took place. Meskel Square, a large central square in Addis Ababa, Zuccotti Park in New York, where the Occupy Wall Street protests took place in 2011. In this case also, the images and layouts of the places were the first inspiration, while the layers and colors were added later. In the words of Jason Moran, there's something in the use of architecture that makes Mehretu's paintings similar to jazz compositions.
There was something I had seen in her previous work about the way she used architecture, and this piece also revolves kind of around architecture as well. But it's architecture during chaos, architecture as a structure to be sometimes broken down, architecture in the decay, power in decay. And then how does that resonate in music? How does that resonate, especially in Black music from America, the music that I play, jazz music? How does improvisation is a kind of a decomposition of the composition. It is breaking it down literally in real time.
In Moran's eyes, the 4 paintings of the Mogama series are similar to the 4-part suite of A Love Supreme, the 1965 masterpiece by John Coltrane.
So there was something thinking about Mogama and Julie and John Coltrane and A Love Supreme and what these pieces kind of also mean to their own development, I think, too. So it's the 1960s. So we are not absent from his need to bring love into a country that only is wanting to revolve around hate and destruction of a people. And I think Julie also recognizes this with architecture and her painting, is that all the people and all of the study that it took to and engineering it takes to make these spaces, but also when they come crumbling down, we'll have to also document that moment. And I think Julie is looking at this at the same time that Egypt is in a real crisis. So there's something about the time, the culture, the moment that then propels the artist to then make these four-part suites. And so Julie and John Coltrane, I feel like are a good match in that way.
In your Ensemble exhibition guide, you'll find a section named Chronology. This is more than just a timeline of Julie Mehretu's life, but also an articulated overview of the lives of Mehretu and the other 7 artists of the exhibition, including a series of historical events. The first date is the birth of David Hammons in 1943. Then we skip to 1960, Sharpeville, South Africa. Protesters make their way to the police station. Agents open fire, killing 249 people. Following the chronology year by year, we find 1977, Julie Mehretu and her parents leave Ethiopia. 1995, Oklahoma City terrorist bombing, carried out by 2 anti-government white supremacists. 2000, Julie Mehretu and Jessica Rankin meet in a bar. And so on up until today. Ensemble is also a musical term. And according to Julie Mehretu, this is the proper interpretation of the exhibition's title.
You can think of an ensemble as like a music ensemble or like a jazz ensemble. I like this idea of a tribe and band of like, group of people that are this group of friends. I'm very close with everyone.
Ensemble is a series by Cora Media for Palazzo Grassi, Pinot Collection, Venezia. It was written by Ivan Carozzi and narrated by me, Caitlin Prest. Fact-checking by Francesca Abruzzese. Story editing by Sarah Palma. It was adapted into English by John Vincent. Music and sound supervision by Luca Micheli. Post-production and editing by Cosma Castellucci. The project manager is Monia Donati. The producers are Martina Conte and Alex Peverengo. Production coordinator is Matteo Scelsa. Recordings by Lucrezia Marcelli and Luca Posi. On-field recording by Giacomo Zilio.